Let's bring Dennis Shanahan, National Editor at The Australian, and get some comments from him. You will know Gary Banks well, Dennis. Sobering assessment, I have to say scarifying in some of his very brutal language. I mean, he didn't miss energy, labour markets, tax and spending. What did you think of his remarks?
Well, it demonstrated just how tough and how tough-minded Gary Banks is. He is level, he's absolutely balanced, he's apolitical, and what he has to say is excoriating of governments of both shades. He has attacked previous Labor governments for overturning the great reforms of the Hawk and Keating years. He's then blamed coalition governments since for not having the courage to go back and work on getting back good industrial laws, good labour force laws, which actually provide us with a balance. And of course, the bottom line was the way we have destroyed our energy advantage. I mean, when they discovered coal, it was the Australian colony had only been going a few years. Coal was discovered in Wollongong and then in Newcastle. It has built Australia's economy for more than 200 years, and yet we are giving away that advantage, and we're seeing all sorts of policy decisions being made without real assessment, which is what Gary Banks and the Productivity Commission have become famed for doing, and they don't give leeway to anyone who doesn't make the right decision. And I think that this is a very big wake-up call for the Albanese government, and it's not picking on the Albanese Labor government. It's actually making the point of what the reality is for the future of Australia's economy if we don't make some of these hard decisions and make them soon.
He's making the point that our region, particularly our region, is not a benign environment at the moment. And he goes on, he talks about belief in those remarks today, and he talks about being branded a denier if you put forward an alternative view or even if you ask questions. So he's basically putting up a manifestation at an economic level of the cancel culture we're seeing in social policy domains. You know, more broadly across the board, we're getting this debate shut down rather than contested. And here this is in our economic sphere as well. I think that's what's horrifying me the most. You'd always hope in these economic portfolio areas, Dennis, that you would have contestability, that there would be fact-based analysis. And here was someone, a luminary like Banks, saying there's not, and if you speak up on any of this, you are a denier. Now, if we can't grapple with these issues, and you mentioned coal there, of course, we're selling it to China, our biggest strategic rival. We're demonising it here. We've got this breakneck transition, and I mentioned Matt Keane a bit earlier, to renewables, but no decent path where we're absenting gas in that path to get there. Regardless of what you think about the end game of climate change, we are dating ourselves in terms of our base finances, let alone our broader macroeconomy.
Oh, that's right. And look, Peter, this was entirely predictable. You mentioned Minister Keane. Now, he has behaved in a hypocritical policy sense. He has tried to push out coal producers. He's tried to shut down coal-fired power stations. And now, when things get tight at the end, where it is clear there is going to be a huge shortfall in power generation in New South Wales, he says, oh, maybe we'll have to go back and look at that, what he dismissed years ago. This is what part of our industry, which has been demonised, coal and other gas, have been completely demonised, and yet they have built the Australian economy so that we're actually in a position where we can transition properly. But it's going to take a lot longer than the 4 years of an electoral term, or just because a politician will feel better if he says we're going to close this down. It is a lack of reality. I mean, the greatest irony is that we are sending coal to Ukraine to help it fight the Russians. What? And yet we want to close down our own power stations. I think Gary Banks had a very good illustration of just what we're doing to ourselves in that Ukraine-Russian example he provided.
Well, I just hope some gutless national leaders in the CEO corporate suites, as well as government officers, now come in behind him and have a rational debate. I won't hold my breath. The Voice. This $10 million, we knew it was in the budget last October. It was earmarked, but the detail was not there. We now know the detail via regulation from Katie Gallagher. Now, if this was fair income civics education, you and I both know machinery of government, it would sit down with the Australian Electoral Commission. It's not. It's inside PM&C. It's inside an Indigenous body. I call this out. This is pro-voice machinations, if not out-and-out campaigning, Dennis.
Well, look, there is so much about the campaign for the Voice which is not being done by the book, which is not being done normally in an approach to a referendum. The Australian Electoral Commission rightly has a worldwide reputation for its ability to conduct elections fairly, openly, transparently. It's given the role sometimes in union elections on things to do in putting out information. It can be trusted to do that in a completely non-partisan fashion. And I think as soon as you take it out of the hands of the AEC, you are inviting the very conclusions that you have drawn, Peter, and which I probably wouldn't disagree with a great deal, because if you're going to have a balanced campaign for a referendum or any other political campaign, you should keep it in the hands of the umpire and keep it that way, balanced and fair.